Mo, do we have anyone on the other end? If there's anyone out there, can you hear us?
I mean, it's showing when you talk and I talk right here, something's happening, green in the mic, so it's definitely picking us up.
Whether that's propagating out.
Right.
Yeah, it's in that. Yeah, that'd be great. It's in that email that I sent out yesterday. You got this set up the way you want it?
I think so. I might just mirror, just make this easier. Well, that's fun.
Okay, well, thanks for coming, everyone. I think most of you are familiar with the R users group. Today we have a talk from Ryan Peake, who's a PhD candidate in ecology, on creating dynamic documents using Shiny and Markdown.
All right. Hopefully everybody can see this, and if you can't, let us know. Shoot us a note, or we'll figure it out. This presentation is on GitHub, and I will share. I'll share that in a bit. So all the code that you see to make this presentation is on there, and all the examples I'm going to show, code is there as well. So one of the things I want to do is just kind of go through the basics. Some of you probably are really familiar with this, others maybe not, but the basics of RMarkdown really quickly, and then really jump into sort of combining Shiny and RMarkdown. There's a lot of great help on RMarkdown elsewhere on the RStudio website. They've got a nice little sort of tutorial and self-help section. You can use it to make all kinds of different documents, HTML, PDF, MS Word. You can set up slides in your documents. You can use it to do all kinds of different things, including code, formulas like this. So really there's a whole wide range of things you can do, and it's pretty simple and easy to learn, which is nice. So I just used some examples here. This is just sort of a layout of what the code sort of setup looks like to make a couple different options. You can set things apart using 3 ticks to make sort of set apart code. If you want to include our code, you can do that, and it will run as well. We'll talk about that in a second. So anyway, you can also make these double columns. You can add pictures. It takes a little bit of getting used to. One thing I will say that I've had some issues with, sometimes when you're knitting this back together and you try to open it in an HTML, say in Safari, sometimes there are issues, and I find it works better on Chrome, but it just depends. So if you are having some issues, try opening it in a different browser, and sometimes that will sort your issues out. You can add plots, and this is based on just code, a really exciting plot, as you can see. Anyway, okay, so are there any questions about that of the people that are here? How many of you, just raise your hands, have used Markdown a fair amount? Okay, sort of. It's pretty easy to learn, so going forward using Shiny, it shouldn't be too hard to sort of incorporate it. All right, so now let's use Shiny. Let's talk about Shiny. So Shiny is a package that has been developed that basically converts your code into HTML and or JavaScript in some cases. And so it basically is taking your R code or Markdown code and then essentially switching it over into something that's dynamic and interacts with whatever the user is doing. And so you can make, essentially the outputs are HTML is the format largely that you can use. That can be in sort of a standalone file that you can scroll through that's like a document, or you can use this sort of format that I'm using right now, which is a slide format, which is really nice. You can use, the great thing about this, so I gave a talk at ESA a year or two ago that I used R and Shiny to make the whole slide presentation. And it was an HTML file, and that's what I gave them, and we just opened it up, and there were no formatting issues. There were no issues with PowerPoint and going from Mac to PC or any of that stuff. So it's actually really nice because platform sort of, it's non-specific, and you make an HTML file and it's a standalone file, and you can have all your slides together. So it's, in some senses, I think it's a really nice way to give a slide presentation. The downside is there's some of the bells and whistles you get with PowerPoint or you know, the Mac options aren't there. But I think if, in some senses, it makes it a cleaner presentation because you can't put too much in, but you can actually put in a lot of the dynamic stuff, the shiny stuff I'm going to talk about, which is really cool.
So is this HTML?
This is HTML.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, this is a slide presentation. So if you go to the GitHub link, you'll be able to download this and open it in R and then knit it, and it opens in an HTML file, and you can save that file, or you can just run it straight off your computer. But yeah, this is just an HTML file. This is running out of Safari right now, but yeah. So yeah, so that's the basic kind of gist of how I've been using Shiny. You can have one other thing. You can have a standalone app, which a lot of times you'll see like a website, and it just has a Shiny app, and you go to that website and you can interact or download data. We use it in a number of ways, but that's one other option, and that's HTML, but that's more you make sort of a specific app, and that's all it is. So those are useful as well. I'll show some examples of an app in the same way. So the basics of the Shiny app seems very small. Sorry. There we go. Sweet. So the basics I'm going to show using the tooth growth data set from the RBase packages, which looks at the effect of vitamin C on tooth growth in guinea pigs, the things you find. It's awesome. So it's basically a really simple data frame. There's three vectors, numeric and factor. So if you were to set up the basics of the Shiny sort of code that goes into this, it sort of seems complex at first. It's really not if you step through it. And there's a lot of great help on this elsewhere. And so I've literally been pulling from that, and I'll show you those help sites as well. Come on in. So basically, there's two components. There's a user interface, or the UI, and there's a server side. There's two sort of, you can either have those as two different scripts if you're building an app, or in the case of this Markdown slide presentations or documents, you nest them together. And so this is just the first part of that sort of nested code that all goes into this Shiny app sort of nested command. So the first part is this user interface, UI, fluid page, and then there's layout options. And the important thing to think about is that it's totally customizable to, come on in, however you want to format it, you can, which is nice. And it's somewhat flexible, and it recognizes, and it will sort of rearrange things based on what you do. So you can actually throw things in, and it'll sort of arrange it and make it look okay. But if you want it to be very specific, it's nice because they call them fluid rows. You have to think of like your slide or your document is essentially 12 sort of columns wide. And so you can arrange those columns in any sort of fashion you want. And so that's what this does. This is saying for one row, and so the whole document could be one big row, which is all I've done here, but you could have multiple rows, and you can nest those in different ways. But essentially your row, so the first part of this is a column that is three columns wide, or 3 units wide. And then the next part is basically, okay, what is that? What is going to go in that column? And there's many options. Again, the help has lots of different options on what sorts of sort of input or buttons you want to include. This is just a simple drop-down box that's a select input. And sort of it says, let's select what dose we want to use. You list that data. You could even list a vector here, so it doesn't have to be a list. But and then you kind of tell it what you want the default. When we open this up, what is the default going to be? What is the selected unit going to be? And then there's a few other commands, multiple is one other option where we could say you could actually select 2 or 3 of these, or all of them, or just one of them. So it gives the user the option to do that. You can turn that off if it doesn't make, if it doesn't make sense to do that. This is again just a really simple example. And then the next one here is another example. You can use a slider, sort of adjust things on a sliding scale, and this is just to adjust the plot point size. And so you give it a min, a max, the value you want it to default to again, and then what the step is going to be. And then, so that was, remember, that's our first column. It's three units wide. Then the next column is going to be our actual plot. And that plot is going to be, the width is 9. And so that equals 12 total. And all it is plot output plot. And I could name this whatever I want. And you'll see these things named here, this var, size, and plot are the important, those are the variables that you're going to look for in the server side. So that's what we're going to use in the server side. Make sense so far? All right. Okay, so the next part is the server code. And this is still, remember, this is still nested within this Shiny app command. And this is how you, if you're going to nest it in a document or a slide, this is how you have to sort of wrap it in this Shiny app. So server, they have this function input output, and that's just essentially saying it's going to look for the input, which is the user interface component, and then it's going to spit out whatever you want it to spit out. In this case, we're going to spit out a plot. And remember, so this name has to match the name that we called it above here, right? So they have to be the same. One other thing to keep in mind, if you have multiple plots or multiple things, make sure you name them differently, because it will freak out, or sometimes it won't. It'll just rewrite the existing one that you already did. So if you have a lot of apps or a big long document, make sure you're saying like plot 1, plot 2, plot 3, or they're unique. So then all I'm doing here is basically taking the data that we called above, this input var, which is the dose, and I'm subsetting based on whatever the user selects. So I'm just saying for, whatever the doses are that someone clicks a button, let's subset the data to equal that, okay? And then this is just for plotting purposes. Since I'm using ggplot, I needed to convert this to a factor. And then you just make your plot. And what's cool is you can use anything. You use base graphics. You can use whatever plotting package you're comfortable with. It works really well. And the only thing you're doing is using this input $. And that's basically, so input var, input size, whatever your inputs are, that's how you sort of stick them in your analysis, whether that's you're running a model. This is really cool because you can set this up. You could do a PCA and play around with your different data, and it'll run instantaneously, like on the fly. You just click a button and it's going to run it, and you're done, which is awesome. So I think it's an amazing way to explore data and present data. And so, yeah, I think it's really useful. So that's it. And then so we have this sort of plot set up. And so let's see what this thing looks like. So here's the basic thing. Here's that. Remember, this is the 3 column on the left. That's 3, and on the right, that's 9. And then here's our dose. And again, so I can select other doses. That's that multiple option. I can change to whatever one I want. I just do 1. And notice the plot is updating instantaneously.
You are presenting to everyone. Do you want to hit that screen?
Yep. Okay.
Switch windows.
Yeah. Dive. All right. Okay, where were we? So you can highlight a section, and so we were interested in this spring recession period. And notice if I click anywhere else, it resets. So I can highlight this section, and we were sort of trying to figure out what is the descending rate that is associated with that. And so, if I wanted to sort of click on this, I can find out the duration. So it's giving me the duration, the max, the min over that time, the dates. If I hover on a given point, it will tell me that. Similarly, we could say, okay, let's find out what the storm peak is. And we can just go hover over here and say, oh, wow, that was 13,000 CFS on 2011, March 14th. And so similarly, what's really neat is below this, you can't really see it. So again, this is a Shiny app, which is cool. So now suddenly you have a slide, but it's sort of expandable, right? You have like, suddenly you're given extra room to work with. So I've added a table below here, which tells me exactly what the data I'm highlighting here, that's the data it's giving you. And so you could highlight a lot or a little. And what's also really neat, I haven't added it, but I could add another button here that says download CSV. So you could select just the data you're really interested in, and or somebody could do that themselves. And it's a really nice way to sort of work with the data. Or if I wanted to search for a given date, I could just type it in here, and it should show up. And it's going to highlight that data, although that didn't work. We'll just say July. All right. So there's all the data from July. This is, I think it's daily. So anyway, so this is one example. The code again is in the GitHub, so you'll be able to see how to do this. This is a little more complicated with the sort of selecting and interactive highlighting, but it's, again, if you break it out into little pieces, it's not too bad. What's that?
Is that what GGViz or just select?
GGViz is more interactive, I think. Actually, they probably have similar underlying functionality. Yeah, but that's more like you hover over something and it will highlight it, right? Yeah.
It's a little more like JavaScript.
Yeah. So yeah, and you can change the year here, so we can look at different years of the river. So you can play with that. The other option, Leaflet, the Leaflet package has really, I think, revolutionized our ability to provide maps and make maps interactive, and it's amazingly easy. The code for this is like 6 lines long. I'll show you in a second. It's super easy to just make a simple map. And I just added polygons for the states. That's all I did. But this is completely surfable. You can sort of move in, you can zoom into what you want. I'll show you a map later where you can actually turn the layers on and off. You can add shape files to this. You can add GPX or KMLs. All those options are things that you can add and make a really nice map that's totally dynamic and interactive. Similarly, so here's another example. You can add a box. You can add some points. I just said randomly generate this many bubbles of different sizes, and then zoom into this sort of picture. But I can zoom out of that. I can zoom back in. Whatever you want to do. So, and this is pretty easy again to do, thanks to Leaflet, which has been, I think, a really nice addition. One other option, so faceting not faceting, conditional plots. So conditional panels are basically something that if the user clicks on a certain thing, another box is going to appear or something else is going to happen. And so a lot of times, I think I have an example later that shows if you click on a box, another box appears and then you interact with the data that way. But if you don't want to do that, it won't be there. It doesn't clutter things up. So this was temperature data. And so if I wanted to look at it by site, I can click on this and it'll update. This is temperature plotted, color of temperature, or colored by temperature. And so you can see it's sort of just another way to display data. You change the years. That's another example. All right, so let's look at this this website has all these great tutorials. There's cheat sheets if you're interested in that. So this is awesome. They have all these examples for websites, or I think my favorite is the gallery. If we go to the gallery. So this is just a gallery of all kinds of examples. It gives you simple examples. It gives you, different widgets, which is the different buttons you can use. So like let's look at the widget gallery. What's really nice about all of these is it has buttons for C code, and you can play around with it. You can copy it. You can take it and do whatever you want, break it, and then try to fix it. But it has all these different options, and it gives you the code examples right there. And I think it's a really nice way to make this work. And so let's look at another link. Where's the other one? These cheat sheets are nice. I'm not really going to go into those, but I do want to show you some of these. There's another example, this one and this one, and this is another gallery. This Show Me Shiny gallery has some really nice options that I think you can search for different things. Like if I want to know, okay, PCA, has somebody made a PCA app? If I search, yep, there you go. Some sort of visualization PCA. So if you're interested, if someone's done it before, not all of these have the code, but you can just see kind of how they've set things up. Okay, let's look at this one. This guy has done some really awesome Shiny apps, and he's made them really clean. He has these like little tabs you can, and I'll show you. I've taken some of his code actually and used it to adapt to some of the apps that I've built. But this is cool because there's a leaflet map over here, and if I click on any point, it's automatically going to give us these really nice climate predictions. And you can play around with precipitation. We can play around with the different RCPs. For those of you doing climate stuff, you can change and pick different decades. It's pretty amazing. And this is all just totally, click and play. So you can imagine somebody would be able to really take this and actually look at data, and it's pretty amazing. And it's also a great outreach tool. All right, so that's one. This is a similar precipitation one that he's built. This one takes a little bit longer, but it gives you the option to download your plots. And then this is more what you were talking about with Google Viz. He sort of has built these really nice bubble plots. It's really beautiful. You can include do these other sort of options. Now, if I click on this, sorry, make this a little bigger. This is the conditional stuff I was talking about. If I click on this, this whole set of options opens up. And then I can start playing around and saying, okay, let's make these look different. And you can play around with that and then click generate plot. It'll update everything. The dots are a little smaller now. So that's one. Oh, this one's kind of cool, though it's having issues loading. Let's try to reload. One thing with Shiny, sometimes you just need to reload it if it hangs, particularly if there's a lot of data that it's working to chunk through. This is vehicle collisions in Scotland, and they've mapped out. They have an amazing data set of exactly where all these collisions are, and you can color it by severity. You can make it so they have a lot of nice little plotting options. You can make the dots much bigger and see kind of what's going on. And again, this is powered by, this is a leaflet map with data linked to it. And then they have these nice, this little kind of plot over here that's updating based on whatever I select. It gives you these little graphs. I think this is a really nice one. And then it also gives you a table, so you can add these tabs up here. So there's the table similar to what I had set up. So you can sort through data and look for a given day or time. Okay, one more example. Oh, this is another climate example. We'll skip that. I wanted to show you a couple that I've worked on just for fun. This one is Gossamer stages, which is a developmental stage for amphibians, for frogs in particular. So why is that looking odd? Well, I can see it. There's numbers over here, I promise. If you change the numbers, the photos change instantaneously. You get these really nice pictures. Somebody could easily sort of look and say what's happening. Let me see if I can.
Probably just the resolution.
Yeah. There. So there you can actually see it a little bit, but so down here is the actual Gossamer stage, and so that's from the paper that this came out of, and then you can see the picture update as well. So another example, we worked with some folks from U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service on one of their refuge climate projects. They were interested in sort of just how do we deal with all this climate data. So we parsed out all these different climate data sets, BioClim, Climate NA, CMIP5, and then we basically said, okay, we're going to look at a few different periods, and then if you were to compare the variables, which models look different, like just to decide, because there are so many different climate models. And so it was a nice way to share with them sort of what are the metric definitions used in all of these models, how are they similar, how are they different, and then you can go through and say, oh, actually this model is definitely much warmer and wetter versus another model that might be much drier. And so they could at least know what was going into things and viewing things. So we made this app, crunched all the data, and then added a Shiny map as well, or a leaflet map of the refuge. So this is the refuge, and then all the little tiny dots that you can barely see, those are the grid that has been used for one of the climate data sets that's downscaled. And then you can add the background info on sort of what this is all about, and then references and code. And again, I try to make everything, it's really nice to add your code at GitHub or elsewhere so that people can go play with it.
So is the code underlying like that page, for instance, just one markdown file?
It's two. So in this case, these are standalone apps. So this is the user interface file and then a server file.
Okay.
But that's it. But you could nest them. You could put them in one big file.
But then you knit that into an HTML, and that's what's like hosted.
You essentially, yeah. So let's go look at actual code here. So this is the slide presentation that I was just showing you all, and this is a single sort of standalone markdown file, right? If I wanted to show a Shiny app, let's say, so this would be two files, a server and a UI. And if I wanted to run this, usually there's an option right here, run app. You run that, and you can actually upload that for free. They have like Shiny server, or Shiny has their own little thing you can host. I will say they've been changing it, sort of. It used to be free and you could have unlimited visits. Now it's like if you get a lot of people that visit your page in a given month, they'll shut it down until the next month when you get like your 100 visits or whatever it is. You can pay for more if it's something you're using. For the apps that I was showing you, we actually lucked out and had one of our guys at the Watershed Center actually was able to we have a sort of an R server, so we could load things up to that. That's a little more above my pay grade as far as what I understand, but we worked with him to sort of make sure that we can upload our apps, which is essentially just uploading our scripts, and then it spits it out to a website. So you can host these. Some options, I know people just will put the code up on GitHub and say like, here, all you have to do is run one line of R. Which most people should be able to do, and you can set it up so that it's fairly painless for someone who's not familiar to be able to run. If you don't have the option, or you don't want to put it up on a website. And then one other option that I was going to show was the download CSV. I mean, I may have shown this before, but this is another option where we share sort of our whatever data we're collecting, temperature data, river data, and then people select what they're interested in, and then if they want to download that, they just click here, and it will spit that out as a CSV that they can name as whatever they want. So that's one other way you can share your data. So I think it's about, oh, one other thing I was going to mention, and sort of goes along the lines of what you were saying. When you set this up, these files have a header called YAML, which stands for YAML. Basically, that is what is sort of telling it what kind of document you're creating. And so you can change this. There's IO slides, there's HTML document, which is the standalone HTML, PDF, so you can generate PDFs. There's some really great examples if you want like a hard report, you can make it look really nice. You can do that. The thing that makes it shiny, and so the only thing that works with shiny is obviously HTML or the slides, because you can't do it in a static PDF. But you just add runtime shiny, and that will basically it'll pull those and make them dynamic and interactive. You can play around. There's tons of options, and all this is on the RStudio's sort of Markdown help page. They've got a list of like how to play around with this and the different themes that are available. So that's basically how you change your document to standalone. That's all I've got. So if people have questions or I can show some more examples, I'll send the email out with the GitHub link to this presentation.
Questions for Ryan?
Have you ever done anything where you built the data upload from the user?
We were just working on that. I was going to show, where's the fish one? So sort of, we had a workaround. There are ways you can do that. It's a little trickier because if someone else is doing it simultaneously, there are issues of like, how do you write things? What we came up with was actually linking to like a Google spreadsheet or a form. So people could go and look at something, and then they can essentially load their data that way, enter their data. And the nice thing is then we can read from that same, it's spitting to like a Google spreadsheet. And there are apps or a package and some code that lets you pull from that and actually compile your data. So you can actually, so it's sort of working both ways, which is nice. So it's sort of a workaround, and there are a few examples, but so this is a project up on the Fall River where we've pit tagged a ton of rainbow trout. And so for fishermen that are up there, there's a lot of guides. It's a really popular fly fishing spot, and we've given them wands so they can scan the fish. And so the cool thing is there's cell reception, and this formats well on a phone. They can say, oh, here's the tag code. I'm going to type it in and see what fish, when this fish was tagged, what it looked like, where it was tagged initially, the size that it was initially tagged at, and then how many pit tag detections have we had, and where they've been. And then you can sort of summarize that data. This fish is nice because there's a lot of data for it. But so these are the weekly detections for all fish, and you can sort of see where it might fall within that. And so what was cool is we were like, oh, we should take advantage of the fact that these guys might catch something and want to like tell us they caught it and put their code in. So we made this little online survey form, and you just click on that, and it's just a Google form, and all you do is enter your time, date, how big it is, and where you are, and that's it. And then submit, and that uploads straight to it. So this was a really cool sort of, we were like, wow, this works really well. A nice way. And so that's the other thing is because Shiny does allow you to, it formats to whatever sort of tablet or phone, it's fairly good at doing that. So people could use it mobily, which is pretty awesome.
I wonder if you could allow for multiple instances of the site to be run so that you don't have to do, I mean, I assume your Google
Yeah.
is working just fine, but
Yep.
are you thinking of like doing something like that, like running G-Unicorn or something? So
Well, you can have multiple running at the same time.
and it won't mess up your data input?
No, not if you're not in the way that we have it set up. Yeah, which is nice because each form is a different page, so that's fine. I know. So if you do it straight through like a server, like a database sort of call, that's where it gets tricky, and you have to use like authentication. A lot of times people will try so that it sort of forces you to have single instances. But again, it gets a little tricky, and I haven't seen like a great example of somebody that's been able to pull that off with the Shiny sort of option. Cool. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Ray.
Thanks.